Hey everybody, I'm Grandmaster Ben Finegold here with the Sunday Class 3 and Class 1. That's right, because it's Class 3 for our chess center, but it's my first class, right? It's also the first class we recorded. Now, last night, I was very busy. Oof. I don't know how I made it in this morning. And I was thinking, what do I teach these future leaders of America? And then I realized you guys were showing up, and I was like, all right. Anyway, it could be you in the audience are future leaders of America. Okay, so we see what the leaders are now, so it could be, right? Yeah, truth hurts. All right, yeah, you should be very pensive about that. Anybody? No? Kids? Nothing? No. Do any of those kids know who the vice president is? Any of them?
Yeah.
Wait, how many of them other than him? Do you think the other two know?
I think I know.
Who's the vice president, Christopher? Yeah, you don't know. Look at that look on your face. What?
Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, Hillary Clinton's the vice president. You.
Mike Pence.
Right. Was there a worse answer than Hillary Clinton?
I don't think so.
What, maybe like Kim Jong-un? That's probably a better answer. That's closer to being true.
Good effort.
All right, good job. No, she lost the election. So she's the furthest. Although actually, you're almost right. You don't know this, but a long time ago, they did it like that. Like if you lost the election, then you were the vice. Yeah, like maybe not in this country. But, all right. Anyway, I wanted to show you the anatomy, but since there's kids, there'll be a different kind of anatomy, of a chess tactic. Okay, that was what the lecture is going to be about. So when chess tactics happen, you see the tactic, you don't solve it, the computer shows you the right answer, and you're like, oh yeah, that's right. But you have to know how the tactic was born. Okay, it takes 9 months, right, for the tactic to be born. Yeah. Right, Christopher?
Yeah.
Yeah, see? And he's higher rated than you, so he's right. You, Max.
What?
You should raise your hand.
Oh, it depends.
Yeah, it depends is actually always the answer for everything. That's true. Now, look at this position. Let's say you imagined a checkmate tactic, and you can make up your own chess problems, and I tell my students to do that. Do my students listen? No. When I have a chess camp for strong kids, I mean strong for here, they're required to make up a puzzle during class. I give them like 15 minutes, and then I make up one. And then we look at them all, and we see if there's only one answer, if the puzzle's difficult, and there's more than one answer, and the puzzle's not difficult. And sometimes there's no answer. They're like, oh, my move doesn't work, never mind. Okay, so we're going to do an anatomy of a chess puzzle, and we're going to do all kinds of chess tactics. This tactic is going to be a smothered mate with a pawn. Okay, so if you do a smothered mate with a pawn, it would be easier if the king was in the corner. So I put the king in the corner. Then I put the pawn checking the king. That's the only square on the chessboard that the pawn checks the king. Okay, now I have to go backwards and make a puzzle. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I already know the puzzle, I'm just going backwards. So this puzzle already exists, but I'm gonna, wait, what am I gonna do? Oh, I can't do it from here, I have to leave? Wow, okay. Good job, ChessBase. Good understanding of ChessBase. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna make a checkmate, and then I'm gonna be like, all right, if it's a smothered mate, that means black has to have pieces here and here. So I'm going to put a bishop here, because that's the puzzle, and I'm going to put a pawn here. Right? Now, if the pawn was defended, that would be checkmate. Remember when my king was on c7? Remember that? I just showed it to you a minute ago. He's like, no, he doesn't remember. He doesn't remember. He doesn't. I just did that. No?
Yeah, I saw it.
Okay. Well, I can't do that, so I'm going to put it on c8. Now, if you were a grandmaster or even a master, you would know what I'm showing you now. But you guys are like, what's going on? Okay, this is a well-known puzzle, but you guys don't know it yet. Now, it could be that pawn was on b6, and this was a mate in one puzzle, and the answer was b7. That would be sort of easy, right? So what we're going to do is, we'll put something of black's on b7. Let's make it a pawn. And we'll put a pawn on b6. That way, if the b pawn moves and takes something, we can play b7 mate. So it's going to take something on A6 or C6. The problem is, if it takes something on C6, that means black could have moved this pawn. Something on A6, then he can't move the pawn, although he could take on B6 unless it's pinned. That's the puzzle. However, I just made up another puzzle, but it doesn't work. I'm like those kids in my class. Okay, I'll make up another puzzle. Watch this puzzle. I'm just making this up now. Okay, this is a mate in 2 puzzle. I go here. If you take my pawn, it's mate. You agree. If you play A6, it's mate. If you play A5, it's mate. I'm the greatest puzzle maker ever, except for one thing. What should black do?
Move the bishop.
Then move the bishop, then it's mate. I'm the greatest. I made the greatest puzzle ever, except it doesn't work.
Oh.
It works in this class. They're like, yeah, good problem. I give up.
A takes B6.
Yeah, unfortunately, A takes B6. And now actually black's winning. Yeah, truth hurts. Okay, so now there's no mate because the king is here. So I made up a puzzle, but it didn't work. I tried to improve on the puzzle that I knew. Okay, now I'll show you the puzzle that I know. Actually, some of you know it. I guarantee at least one of you in the audience knows it. At least one. Okay, it's a famous puzzle. So instead of playing the pawn on C5, which is what I did, I'm going to do the real puzzle, which is to put something on A6. That way, the puzzle works. We have to stop A takes B6. What 2 pieces for white can I put on A6 and black can't play A takes B6?
Rook and queen.
Rook and a queen. We don't want to have the queen. That's overkill. We want the lowest piece to make it harder. So make it a rook. So put a rook here, and this is a famous puzzle. Wait, you've seen this puzzle?
Yes. I know how to do it.
All of a sudden, he's like, wait, I know this puzzle. Now, do you think the guy who made the puzzle just set up the puzzle? Or he was like, I want a smothered mate with a pawn. And then he figured it out backwards. And you're like, what are you talking about? Even though I just explained it. You!
Morphe game.
It's not a game, it's a Morphe puzzle. That's right. Morphe invented this puzzle, but it's not a game. Do you recognize it?
I don't.
No, but you know the answer because I just explained it. What do you mean you don't? Well, you look like you don't know the answer.
Rook to A6.
Yeah, rook to A6. This is a mate in 2 puzzle, rook A6. Have you seen that, Karen?
No, and in fact, when you just said it, I just explained it. I didn't even hear you explain it, so I was confused. I never heard you say rook A6. No, I've never seen this puzzle.
Remember when I said what could you put on A6 so that it's and you said queen or rook,
Okay.
right?
I did hear you ask that.
Yeah. So-
A file in my head.
Right. So rook A6, black has how many legal moves? I'll give anybody there $1 if they get the right answer. One, 6,
6.
6,
Oh, 6, yeah, 6.
6, 6, 6, 1, 6.
Oh wait, no, there's another.
7.
Andrew Spencer, he says I refuse to answer.
7.
There's 7.
Yeah, there's 7. I like 1. 1's a funny answer. Okay, there's 6 bishop moves and 1 pawn move. If you play any of the 6 bishop moves, I play rook takes mate. You agree?
Yes, we do.
If you take the rook, I play mate. Now, let's go back. Why did he play rook A6? Why not just like rook A2? What's the difference? Yeah,
They can't. A6.
A6 or A5. A5's a bad move, but it stops mate in 1. A6,
Stop.
Now the game's close to a draw. Probably white's winning, but I have to think about it. Yeah, white's definitely winning. In fact, a good winning method is rook here, rook takes... Actually, they all do that. Yeah. Okay, so rook A6 is the only mate in 2. Now, when Morphe invented the puzzle, he didn't have a good version of chess-based. Just like when I said kids should have negative ratings, he had chess-based negative 100. It was 100 versions before the real version, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, confusing the audience. Now, because we have engines and computers and all kinds of stuff, I could just turn the engine on. It would say rook A6 is mate in 2, and that no other move is mate in 2. That way we can check. If you're doing a mate in 4 problem, and you're like, I wonder if this problem has an answer, you put it in the engine, it says mate in 4 in 1/millionth of 1 second, so it has an answer. If it says mate in 4, mate in 4, mate in 4, now there's 3 answers. That's not a good puzzle, right?
Yeah.
So if I turn the engine on here, it's going to say rook a6 is mate in 2, and there are no other mate in 2s. That's a good problem. How did the problem start? Probably Morphy wanted a smothered mate with a pawn, so he did that. He reverse engineered it. Okay? Now, this is something you have to do if you want to be good at chess and be good at tactics. That's actually the point of this lecture, is we're going to show you how to do tactics. You have to figure it out in reverse order. Now, since most of you are children, if you go to a restaurant, occasionally they have a kids menu. And even if you don't get it now because you're too old, you used to get it. You got it a year ago, 2 years ago. Maybe you still get it. And on some of them, they have the thing where you draw the line from one side to the other. Okay? If you've ever done that, you know what I'm talking about. A good way to do it is to start at the end and go back to the beginning. Sometimes that's easier.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we do that in chess. So here's what we do. Watch. If we do this, I'll just make up a really easy puzzle, and then I'll make it more difficult. White to play is very easy. You play knight check, and you win the rook. And you're like, why are you showing us this easy puzzle? Because I could give you the same puzzle, but put a lot more pieces on the board and make this move illegal. And then you're like, well, then there's no answer. That's too hard. If you have a winning move that you think is easy, do you think that's easy? But then you have a real game and it's not possible. Why don't you make it easy? Then you'll have it for real, right? Okay, so a lot of times a puzzle will be because you're making people do things so you can play a move like this. Okay, you want to do that. Okay, so now, don't do that. So now we're going to go back and we'll make it a little tougher. Just a little. Not too, it's a little tougher. Okay, so we have this position, and we'll give white a pawn so white's winning. That seems fair, right? Okay, now what's funny is in this position, knight e5 not only doesn't work, it's illegal. It won't even let me do it, right? It puts it back on f3. Do you see why?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're like, man, he showed us this tactic, but I can't do that tactic. Then you go cry, right?
No.
Now, this is harder than the last puzzle, but only a little bit harder. The bathroom's down the hall. This problem's so easy, Christopher refuses to raise his hand. He's like, this is insulting to me. These guys are so happy to solve it. They're like, oh my God, I know something. You, Max.
Queen takes queen.
Right. And then after it takes, you're like, wait, I saw this position before. And you played there and you won, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you can keep doing that. You can make it harder and harder and harder. And you guys are like, why is this so hard? And I'm like, it's not hard. You just won't do the one extra step. You know the answer, but it's not that easy. It's a little bit harder. And you could keep making it harder where Magnus solves it in 1 second and you guys never solve it. And you're like, Magnus, how did you solve that? And he's like, it's just like that. There's just one more step. And you're like, that's too many steps. Okay, now I'll show you a really hard problem that's the same problem. It's the same thing, it's just harder. Okay, and this is one of my favorite problems, actually. Okay, so we'll put some pieces on the board, because that's fun, right? And we'll give white a king, and we'll give black a king, and then we'll do this. Now, this is a famous puzzle. Who's seen this puzzle before?
I think I've seen it before.
Right, maybe. Okay, now you'll notice black is up a rook, because I said so. So if you're white, you're like, man, I'm down a rook. But if I take the rook, and they take back, that's queen and 2 pawns versus queen and 2 pawns. Usually that would be a draw. And if I take a pawn, I get checkmated. So maybe you shouldn't take that pawn. Okay? So you're like, well, white's down a rook, but he can take a rook and then it's a draw. But this is white to play and win. But there's extra steps. Bathroom's down the hall.
I know it.
Christopher.
Queen takes a 7 check.
Play queen takes a7 check.
King takes.
Confusing the audience.
Queen takes.
King takes.
You have to take.
B captures on the C8 with knight.
Takes on c8, making a knight. Now, if the answer was there was a pawn here and you made a knight, you'd be like, that was easy. This was a little tougher, but it's the same final outcome. A knight is forking two pieces, right?
Yes.
We had to do an extra step. We had to force the king to a7. Then when you did, you had the knight fork that wins, even though you didn't have a knight. We just made a knight, right?
Yes.
That was harder than the first puzzle.
Yes.
But the answer is the same. A knight's forking a king and queen.
Yes.
You just had to make it happen. And you're like, that's too hard. But it wasn't too hard. Don't kick. Okay. And all the tactics are like that. And what you have to do to solve tactics is look for things. And if you do Puzzle Rush a lot on chess.com, or you do Tactics Trainer, or you go to Lee Chess and do puzzles, or you go to Chess Tempo and do puzzles, or anywhere else, you'll recognize things. You'll be like, oh, I've seen that before. Then you'll solve the puzzle. So here's one you've seen before. Well, some of you, I don't know. Okay, so we're going to put a king here, and we're going to open the diagonal to the king. I could put a pawn here. That blocks the diagonal. Okay, never play f6. Okay. And we'll have this position. Rawr. And we'll give black a rook, because I'm a nice guy. Okay. So we have this position. Okay. Now, a lot of people, you guys are people, right? Some of you. You're like, oh no, my knight's attacked. And then you cry. And your parents are like, why are you crying? And you're like, my knight's attacked. That's a good reason. Okay. Now, most people, when the knight's attacked, they move their knight away if they see it. If they don't see it, then you take their knight. Okay. Instead, you could look at something else in the position. You could look at the king. Don't do that. And the open diagonal to the king. Is the back rank open, or does black have a defensive piece there? Yeah, black has a rook. If black's rook was gone off the board, why can't I get it off the board? There we go.
Yes.
Then why would play queen d8 mate? Yeah. See, so what I do is I look for open lines to the opponent's king. If the back rank is open, sometimes that's mate. It's mate here. Is the back rank open here? No. But this diagonal is open. Never play f6. I guess I'll play queen d5 check. Oh wait, I very cleverly put a pawn on c6, so there wasn't two answers to my puzzle. See, smart. So you guys aren't raising your hands for some reason. You don't look too confident. Man,
Okay,
he looks really unconfident.
queen b3.
There you go. Okay, now, here's a question you'll get wrong. Ready? How many legal moves does black have?
3.
3. 3.
What do you two say?
3.
3.
3.
Okay, this move is probably the computer move. Okay, and then if you play king f8, I have mate in 1. So you play king h8. Now, what's the checkmate pattern you've all learned? You learned it.
Yes, it's easy.
What's it called?
The smothered mate.
Smothered mate. You check, then you double check. This is still mate. So the guy goes to h8, and now you have a draw. Yay!
No, queen to g8. Knight
But you have a draw.
Queen
No.
to g8,
No. Queen g8's wrong, and this is going to be hard to explain. But I'm going to ask Andrew Spencer. Who's higher rated? That kid or Anish Giri?
Anish Giri.
Right, and he said knight f7, knight h6 draw. I asked him. Anish Giri is higher rated than you, so if he says knight f7, knight h6, I can't disagree.
Sam
Okay.
Shanklin would resign here.
Yeah, actually it's funny.
Okay,
Anish Giri was playing Sam Shankland, and it went check, 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 and Sam put his hand out, and Anish Giri thought it was a draw, but Sam was resigning. Complicated joke. Okay, so queen g8 check, and then checkmate, right?
Yeah.
Now, here's what's funny about that. If you've never, ever seen that, and you all have, but if you've never seen it, you're not solving that. Nope.
No,
That's like a
okay.
5-move answer.
Yes.
but you've seen it, so it's like, oh, that takes me 1 second. I've seen it before. So there's two ways to be good at chess. One is you sit there forever and figure it out. That's not going to happen, is it? Or you already saw it. That could happen. So let's say you have a chess coach, and your coach says, look at this mate. And you're like, ooh, I like that mate. I like mating. Then 2 weeks later, it happens in your tournament game, and you don't recognize it. So you don't do it.
That's dumb.
Then you show the game to your coach, and he's like, hey, we looked at this mate 2 weeks ago. You're like, oh, yeah, that's right. Or you're like, what do you mean we looked at it? Okay, either one's possible. Okay, but if you actually remembered the mate your coach showed you, and you played it in the game, and this kept happening. Your coach shows you a trick, you play it in a game, and it keeps going. And you learn thousands of tricks, and you remember them. Now you're pretty good at chess, aren't you?
Yes.
Or you're like, yeah, he showed me that, but I forgot. And then he showed it to me again, and I forgot again. And then I'm like, I've shown you this trick 25 times. Why do you keep not seeing it? Okay, now let's go to the opening so I can show you an example of that. Okay, there's a player you've never heard of, except for Karen, named Atulia Shetty. If you play him, you're going to be Shetty out of luck. Okay, I taught him when he was 6. And I stopped teaching him when he was about 11. And now he's 22, maybe? And he's 25-40. That's higher rated than you.
Yes.
Right. And when he was 6 or 7, he kept showing me this position he had. Look at this position. A lot of kids in the Queen's Gambit incorrectly go here. That's a bad move. Now white gets a nice center. Grandmasters would play knight f3, but he's a 6-year-old. So, okay. And so, for some reason, which I don't understand, he had this position several times. Several times. And he won every time. Good student. And the first time he had it, he played some boring move. And I said, I have an idea. Let's look at a non-boring move. What's the least boring move?
Knight takes knight.
Knight takes knight. That's not boring.
Yeah, that's.
Okay, so black has one move,
Bishop takes.
right? And now white plays the crushing move.
Bishop to g5.
G5.
I mean, you're dyslexic, but otherwise you're right.
Bishop B5 check.
Bishop to b5 check.
Oh.
Okay, now queen d7 doesn't look very good now, does it?
Nope.
So we have to analyze c6 and knight d7. Knight d7, takes. If I'm good at counting, white has 3 minor pieces and black has 2. So this looks like white's up a piece, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's look at c6. Take on c6. White's threatening c7 discovered check, winning the queen, and c takes b7 check, winning everything.
Yes.
So I was like, what can black play here? And we looked for like 2 or 3 minutes and we gave up. We're like, black can't play anything here. Black's just lost. Then you turn the engine on, just in case, right? Get some engine action going here. I can't turn the engine on? Is the engine already on? Oh, maybe there is no default kibitzer. That would be a good reason why. And the engine says white's winning. +2, +3, +4. That's better than 0, right? Okay. So we were like, okay, great. In this position, if you had played knight takes knight, you're winning. Instead, he played some boring move like bishop e2. He won anyway, but he wasn't winning. It was just a boring move. About a month later, it happens again. He got this position. Did he play knight takes knight?
Yes.
No.
No, he didn't.
No. And I was like, hey, we looked at this last month. He's like, oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, the truth hurts. He won anyway. Then he kept having this position. Then he was playing knight takes knight. And bishop b5 check, and he won every game. Then he got higher rated. His opponents got higher rated, so this didn't happen anymore. When you play low-rated players, they give all their pieces away. Then when your rating gets high, and so do your opponents, they stop doing that. So then he didn't have it anymore. So when he was a little kid, he had this a lot. They were like, you can't take my knight, it's pinned. Now, that's a very complicated example. I was a grandmaster, and I still wasn't sure if I could sack my queen. because I don't like sacking my queen. Now I'll show you one that I already know. It's also a queen's gambit, and it's in this position. This position I've had hundreds of times with white, and Karen's had it with black. Okay? Or as we say in the chess world, Karen Black. No, nothing. You heard of her, right? No? You never heard of Karen Black?
I don't think so.
Oh, there's a Family Guy episode where Death breaks his ankle, so he has to lay on the couch because he hurt his ankle. So he can't, nobody dies because Death's, he's sick. So Peter has to be Death because Peter's the one who broke, So Peter's on the airplane and he accidentally kills the pilots because he's stupid. And the plane's going down, but luckily Karen Black is on the plane. She's a passenger, so she saves it. And it's a joke because there's a movie you never heard of called Airplane or Airport 75, and she was an actress in the movie. And when the newscasters do the story, the guy says, Karen Black, what an odd reference. So, yeah. Okay, then she's an actress from the 70s. So, anyway, so here, Black can play knight BD7, confusing the audience. The audience is like, excuse me, that knight is pinned. So therefore, this pawn is insufficiently protected. And I was like, that's a pretty nice audience saying, excuse me. Oh, bathroom's down there.
I know the elephant trap. This is called the elephant trap.
It is?
Yes.
Does it ever forget?
What?
Okay. Now, I think that guy's nuts. Peanuts. Now watch this. I take you, you take me. I'm gonna win a pawn with my knight on c3. Notice this knight's pinned.
But it's not.
And the queen isn't protecting the pawn anymore. So white plays here. Because as Run DMC would say, he is tricky. Boom.
You
Okay.
can take the knight.
You can. Now, this is actually very similar to the thing I just showed you, but this is a little easier.
You can take the knight.
This is easier than the last one.
Before.
No talking. It's the same puzzle, but it's easier. Right, Christopher?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You could take the knight on what square?
D5.
D5. You lose your queen, and then there's this check.
And then
Just like the last puzzle, but it's easier. Because white only has one legal move, and then we take it, and black's up a piece. Okay?
and here's a safe.
So, because I knew that puzzle, I was looking for other things like that in the other position where the knight's pinned, but not really. Okay? I'll show you an even easier one. Even easier.
Yay.
Okay? Whoa. All right, the Beatles like that. That was the White Album chess. Okay. All right, wait, I want to say Cream, but is Procol Harum? Who sang White Room? Cream or Procol Harum? It's one of them.
One at Jefferson.
What?
Starship. What was? Yeah.
No, White Room. White Room is either Cream or Procol Harum.
Oh, okay.
I think it's Cream.
I don't think I have the right song in my head.
Yeah, I think it's Cream, but it could be White. Anyway, on the internet, man, I'm going to get crucified. They're going to be like, what? It's obviously whatever you didn't say. Okay, now pay attention. Black goes here, which is very suspicious, so I've played it. Okay, then watch this. This is getting complicated now. Takes. Now, pay attention. If you take with the queen, knight c3, that's stupid for black. So black takes the knight first. Then when he plays queen takes, there is no knight c3. And white doesn't take the bishop. White plays a Zwischenzug. Yeah?
Yeah.
He plays check. He says, if you block with your knight, now you can't take my pawn anymore. And if you block with your queen, you can't take my pawn anymore. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So he blocks with the pawn. He takes the pawn. Now white's threatening c7 check, and c takes b7, discovered, double, triple, quadruple check. Let me tell my phone to stop making noise. Okay, it's not making noise. So black takes back, and white takes back. And now white's up a pawn. Should black take with the knight or the queen? You.
The queen, because the knight's pinned.
That's right. It's under 1400 class, so who knows? Right, the knight can't take. So queen takes, in my opinion, is the best move. It's my opinion. However, some people don't play queen takes or knight takes. And one of those people is me. I've played e5, confusing the audience.
Right.
Okay, and I actually played this in a U.S. championship in 1994. I think Christopher was there, but I don't think Max was.
Yeah, I wasn't born.
I don't want to hear any excuses. What, Christopher was born? Even you weren't born.
Fair.
Were you?
Yeah.
What, 93?
Yeah, I was born in 84.
84? Wow, old school. Okay, now let's play the obvious move for white. Obviously losing. Take the pawn. Based on the previous two puzzles, what's the winning move for black? You're like, you showed us puzzles before? What? You.
Bishop to b4.
Bishop b4 check. And white resigns. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so do grandmasters play the move d takes e5?
No.
No. What do they play to stop bishop b4 check?
E5. Well, no.
Uh,
A3.
A3 is the second best move. What do grandmasters usually play?
Bishop d2.
Bishop d2, developing a bishop, letting the rook go to the open line, and stopping this. This is my game with Walter Brown from 1994. I forgot who won, but it wasn't me. And it was him. Yeah, I got the beat down that game. Yeah. But anyway, the idea is bishop b4 checks winning. When your opponent can play bishop b4 check or bishop b5 check, and you don't have a good response, you could get in trouble. Now I'll show you my favorite game ever, except it's not my favorite game ever. And we're gonna see who gets it first, Andrew Spencer or Karen Black, also known as Karen Boyd. What game is this? I'll give you a hint.
It's something.
One of the persons was me, and one of the persons was the world chess champion.
This is the Carlsen.
Oh yeah,
Finegold.
I've seen this game before. Yeah, you played.
All I have to do is give you some hints, then you know the answer.
Yeah.
Okay, this is Carlsen Finegold from the Pro Chess League in the final match for the World Championship. Who won that match?
You guys.
Our team won.
You guys.
I think I lost this game, but I forgot.
Ben Finegold, you lost this game and you played bishop takes b1.
See, that guy's not as bad as he plays. All right, now let's examine some issues here. If bishop b4 check, Magnus can block with his knight or his other knight, right? He can do whatever he wants. Okay. After this move, okay, which is what I played, now if I check Magnus, he's got to move his king. Okay, and Magnus didn't want to go here because that blocks his bishop, so he took with the queen. And then after check, he moved his king. Okay, and then this position's about equal, maybe white's slightly better, and I got crushed. Okay, I got beat very badly. Okay, I lost, and then our team won. I didn't want to beat Magnus because that's not fair. Right? If you were Magnus, would you want to lose to me?
No.
Right, so I mean, I'm not, yeah, I'm a nice guy. Okay, so you notice the reason I took his knight is I wanted him to move his king and check him here. When somebody can check you and you have to move your king, maybe you should think about that. Maybe you don't want to move your king. You have to think about it before it happens. You're like, wait a minute. And Magnus is like, all right, I'll play king d1, whatever. And then he won anyway. And I was like, don't snap your fingers at me. Is that what happened?
No.
Exactly. Okay, now I'll show you another trick, but I'll show you several settings. Don't do that. Okay, this is the one that happens to me a lot, except it doesn't happen to me because I don't let it happen, but I could someday. Okay, this is the Nimzo Indian, an opening you've never heard of.
I've heard of
No talking.
I heard of it.
Okay. Now, notice that most of my pieces haven't moved yet. Probably I should move some of them. Okay. if I play bishop g5, that's a blunder. It's a tactical blunder, but the answer's 3 moves long. This is under 1400 class. That's not fair, is it? If the answer was 1 move long, you guys would be like, ooh, where's the bathroom? 2 moves long, some of you would have your hand up. 3 moves long, and you're like, somebody else can answer, right? It's just one tactic. Okay, if you move your knight, the queen and bishop are attacking each other. So if it's white's move, white plays bishop takes queen. If it's black's move, black plays queen takes bishop. So when you move your knight, you want it to be check. That way when white gets out of check, play queen takes bishop.
Oh, I know.
You.
Bishop takes f2.
Bishop takes f2 check, confusing the audience. What?
I'm not gonna. Okay, never mind.
If king takes f2, knight to g4.
Yeah.
Knight to g4 check, and then the king moves somewhere, then you take the bishop. Is that good for white or black?
Black.
Black. So is bishop g5 a good move, or is it a blunder?
It's a blunder.
It's a blunder, but the answer's pretty long. If you've never seen that before, that might be hard for either side to see. If you've seen it before, it's not too hard. And I've noticed a very high percentage of the time when black has the winning move bishop f2 that you suggested, then black plays bishop f2 and wins. However, the same person who plays bishop f2, when they're white, they go here anyway, and they don't see their opponent can play bishop f2. That's very common. Not at the Grandmaster level, but at your level. At your level, you're like, ooh, I have winning tactics, I'm good. Then your opponent plays the same winning against you, and you're like, oh yeah, I didn't see that. And I'm like, you didn't see it, you saw it when you had it. Yeah, but I don't see tactics from my opponent. Is that winning chess?
No.
No. If your opponent can check you or take something, and you're like, I didn't see that, then you lose a lot. When they go to Magnus Carlsen, does he hang his queen to a fork and say, I didn't see that?
No.
No, that's what you guys say. You're like, oh yeah, if I had the fork, I would have played it, but he had it, so I didn't see it. That's how you get better at chess, is you see your opponent's tactics. Then you stop them. Okay? And you might say, that tactic was too hard, I couldn't see it. And I'm like, you did that tactic last game. It wasn't too hard. It was just too hard when your opponent did it. Okay? So when your opponent can take something with check, you can't say you didn't see it. Now, I'm going to show you some tricks, because sometimes the tricks work and sometimes they don't. Let's make up a position. Okay. And we're going to vote. There's 5 of you, so unless somebody abstains, we're good. Somebody's going to win. It'll be 3-2, or 4-1, or 5-0, right? Unless you refuse to vote, then I don't know. It's white's turn, because I said so. Is bishop takes f7 check a winning tactic, or it doesn't work? Let's vote. First, you have to look at it.
It doesn't work.
That's not how you vote. It's a secret vote. Now, people at home can't know it. Now the voice recognition software, though that was Mac's son, then you'll have to get witness relocation. Right? You'll have to move to the other Roswell.
I don't even live at Roswell.
But if you did, you could move to the other one. Where's the other one at?
I have no idea.
Right, so then you should live there. Nobody can find you. You don't even know where it is. Do you know where it is?
No.
You? The adults know. Well, I assume you do.
Yeah.
There's one in New Mexico. That's the more famous one.
Oh.
That's where the aliens are. Ask him.
That's where they are.
Yeah, see, backed up. You ever watch Futurama? No? You ever heard of Futurama?
Oh yeah, a little bit.
Oh, yeah, that's good enough. All right, let's vote. Who says that's a good move? Raise your hand. You like that move. Who says that loses? Boo. Right. That doesn't work because the 2 moves that try to win the bishop, knight e5 and knight g5, those don't work. This is just white gives all his pieces away. And this would work, but the queen is there. So that doesn't work. So just because bishop takes sometimes work, doesn't always work. All right. This is a famous position that you all know. They don't all know it. Okay, white has a winning tactic here, but it's not easy. However, if you know tactics, you can build upon the other tactics and figure it out. You can be like, ooh, I know tactics. I'm a good tactics person, right? This tactic actually has a name. It's named after a person. You with the wrong answer.
Knight takes e5.
Incorrect, because that's the right answer. I said the wrong answer. Right, Christopher's right. Knight takes e5, confusing half the audience. Even though there's 5 of them. Half of one person's confused. Andrew looks like he half gets it.
I get it.
Okay. You ever seen that, Karen?
I don't think so.
What's that called?
I don't know what it's called.
Oh, does anybody know what it's called?
No.
You go to the internet, I type it in, it'll be that. Legal's mate.
Oh, look off.
You've heard of that?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's Legal's, well, that's assuming black decides to get mated now. Now, if your opponent does that, if your opponent does that and you have black, you don't have to get mated. You could decide not to get mated. That's what I would decide. I would be like, oh, well, I lost a pawn, and then I would play a pawn down. You might be like, I don't want to be a pawn down. Rawr. All right. And you take the queen. And now what?
Bishop takes
Bishop
pawn.
takes yes.
Bishop takes. Only legal move.
Knight to d5.
Checkmate. Confusing half the audience.
I'm not confused.
So then, in this position, if black doesn't take the queen and like takes the pawn, takes the knight, now white's up a pawn, but it's not mate. You guys have been down a pawn your whole life. What do you care? But mate is bad. So h6, that wasn't a good move. The bishop's not defended. Eventually, there's going to be a good tactic. Eventually, right? Okay, so sometimes this is winning, sometimes it's not. Sometimes this is winning, sometimes it's not. And if you're like, I didn't see that, I'm like, why didn't you see it? You've seen it before. I just showed you like a million examples. And you're like, yeah, I don't know. I only know when I do it. When they do it, I don't know. Does that make any sense?
No.
No. I mean, that's what happens, but it doesn't make any sense. The main difference between grandmasters and you guys, well, I weigh a lot more. But the main difference is when I have a winning move, I make it. When you have a winning move, you make it. That's the same. When my opponent has a winning move, I don't let them do that. You guys are like, I didn't let them do it again. Darn. And I'll let them do it the next game. And I'm like, no, don't let them do that anymore. So if you spend more of your time thinking about what your opponent's going to do, you can see those tactics because you've played them. Pay attention. You with some crazy comment.
I need to go to the restroom.
That's not crazy enough.
You can go.
Yeah, don't touch the lights. Yeah. Then go to your room. Okay.
My room's down.
Now, let's look at another tactic we haven't looked at. It's called a fork. And when I teach forks, I like to talk about 2 ranks. Now, Karen's here. Which 2 ranks do I talk about? The 1st rank, the 6th rank, 4th rank. Which 2 ranks do I talk about for loose pieces?
Well, 4th and 5th.
The 4th and 5th rank. Okay? This is the 4th and 5th for white, and it's the same for black, just in reverse. And the reason is, when you're playing the opening and middle game, and you put your pieces on the 4th and 5th rank, which you should do, sometimes they're not protected, and sometimes they are. When you put those pieces on the 3rd rank, they're almost always protected. Almost always, right? If you put something here, that's protected. Sometimes 2 or 3 times. So in this position, for example, is that bishop protected?
No.
No. Is that bishop protected?
No.
No. So if your opponent takes your bishop, you don't go, oh, I missed that. I mean, you do that, but you shouldn't. You should be like, oh yeah, he took that bishop again. Now, I'll show you something that happened, then I'll show you something that almost happened. This did happen because I saw it. Here, white made the losing move, which isn't easy. There's very few losing moves. Now, obviously, this loses, but that's a bit silly.
Yeah.
He made a losing move that wasn't silly. It might be the only losing move that's not silly.
D5.
What's that?
D5.
D5 isn't silly?
No. It's
Who would play D5? Also D5 is much better than what he did.
Yes.
Really?
D5 is great compared to what he did. Much better. Yeah, he made a much worse move than d5.
Bishop takes knight.
That doesn't lose, that's fine. Just trades bishop for knight.
Knight to f3.
That's probably the best move. Man, I tell them a blunder, they play the best move.
f4.
f4 is strategically suspicious, but it doesn't lose, just bad. He played e3. That loses the game. It's not funny, just loses the
I was
game.
giggling.
Yeah, I know.
Not laughing.
Why? Shh. Why does that lose the game? How does black win?
H6.
h6 wins?
No,
What class is this?
It doesn't.
94.
You can't just say random legal moves and hope that they win. You gotta say the winning move and then say, oh yeah, that
Queen
wins.
to b6.
Man, you were so close.
Queen to a5.
Much better because it wins a bishop. I spent the whole last 3 minutes saying when pieces are on the 4th and 5th rank, and you guys were like, why do you tell us that? See how it's on the 5th rank? Is it defended?
No.
No. So that wins the bishop. It's a free bishop. Okay? That's why I called China, because Tibet was free.
f4.
Good Family Guy joke. Okay.
e4 is worse.
No, e4 is much better. Because after e4, black can win a pawn. If black tries to win the bishop, it doesn't work. You could play bishop d2. You could play queen d2. The only reason white lost the bishop is he stopped himself from playing bishop d2 by playing e3.
Or
If it's black's move, black is not winning. Queen a5 check, bishop d2. Only this loses. He found it. Good job. Okay, that happened. I was watching. And the guy played queen a5 check, and I was like, oh, darn, lost a bishop. Okay, now, here's something that didn't happen, but it happens in my games a lot. I just don't let it happen.
it's something like a common
Okay,
line.
I've had this position maybe 5 times in tournament play, and some of my opponents play e5.
Is that a blunder?
I don't know. That's why this is a class, so you can figure stuff out. Right, Christopher? Christopher's like, what? Christopher's what, am I Archer? All right, so when your opponent plays e5 and you think that pawn is free, maybe they're tricking you. Maybe. Especially if it's October 31st, right?
It's a blunder. If you take the pawn, it's a blunder.
It's a blunder for white or black.
White.
So what's wrong with taking the pawn?
Queen to b4.
Queen b4 check, winning the bishop on h4. So when I'm white, do I take that pawn?
No.
No, I play knight f3 and the game continues. Okay, well, try to play knight f3. Man, I'm better than I thought I was.
Click somewhere else.
Yay, ChessBase is a good program. What's that?
I think the computer's the issue.
Oh yeah, I agree, yeah. And ChessBase is the issue, but mainly the computer. Yeah. Okay, now, what have you learned from those tactics? When you have pieces on the 4th and 5th rank, sometimes they're protected, and sometimes they're not protected. When they're not protected, your opponent might take them. So you got to watch out for that. And more importantly, if that's possible, if you remember long ago, I showed you the smothered mate.
Yeah.
Mainly you showed me the smothered mate.
Yeah.
And the reason there was a smothered mate is the king on g8 was exposed on the diagonal. And the winning move was queen b3 check. Remember that?
Yeah.
This is the same thing. The king on e1 is exposed on the diagonal. So when your opponent plays queen a5 check, queen b4 check, bishop b4 check, and you're like, oh, I didn't see that. Whose fault is that?
Yours.
Well, not mine.
Yours.
Okay, and in fact, we'll do one more. It's one of Archer's favorites, and mine. The England Gambit, named after Friday the 13th. Okay, takes, I hope that was the right horror movie. Takes. Okay, now, there's nothing wrong with white's play. What's wrong is if black plays here and white says, oh, I didn't see that. Because I just talked about that forever. The king's exposed on the diagonal. A queen and a bishop can check you. So if your opponent does that and you're like, oh, I missed that. Don't miss that. Bishop d2. And then white has one good move here.
Knight c3.
Knight c3. And white's probably better here. Okay. Now, there are blunders like that, and I'll finish up with it, that you actually do lose. And you don't want to lose, do you?
Oh,
By watching you guys play, it's hard to tell.
hooray, I just won something.
All right, now in this position, is that bishop protected?
No.
Okay, you sure? Right. So I check you because I said so.
Then queen to b4.
Then queen to b4 is the threat. So knight e2 loses a bishop. Bishop e3 loses a bishop.
Queen e2 does not lose a bishop.
That's correct. So what do grandmasters play here?
Queen to e2.
Queen e2. If you played knight e2 and they went here, you'd be like, oh yeah, Ben told me about that, but I forgot, as per usual. The next time you're like, I'll go here instead. Ah, it's the same thing. Darn. Darn, not again. Right. Now, when you have those winning moves, you usually play them, but you let your opponent do them. You can't let your opponent do them. You got to see them. Why did that exist? Bishop is on the 4th rank, not defended, open diagonal to the king. Then you got to watch it. Some chess coaches recommend castling. When you castle, it's very rare there's open lines to your king. Your king's pretty safe. When your king's not castled, there's open lines everywhere, and you're like, no. So here, there's an open line to the king this way and this way. So you got to be careful, right? Bad things could happen, right? You don't want bad things to happen to good people, right? If you can call yourselves people. All right, and now it's time for my 3 favorite words. Class is
over.
dismissed.